Hey there, and welcome to the Mugcast, a cozy listen to pair with your coffee. I'm Hugging a Mug, a writer on Medium, covering everything from travel and study abroad to music, psychology, and femininity. Every week, I read one of my stories aloud with some new reflections and insights. So grab your mug, settle in, and let's get into today's piece. For today's episode, we're going to be reading an article called The Sound of Feminism: How Female Voices in Pop Culture Reflect Political Agendas. Listen your way through the empowerment of women in history and learn from great female voices like Sabrina Carpenter, Christina Aguilera, or Aretha Franklin how to use your own voice. This article discusses two topics. The first one being the waves of feminism, which is basically the history of feminism. It would be too broad to discuss the whole history on all parts of this globe. There's too much to learn about this, and I'm still learning for sure. So this is only like an introduction. If you've never heard of the waves of feminism and you've never been part of the discussion about fifth wave feminism starting now, or you've never been recommended videos about femininity in general, this might be a nice introduction for you, because I find that all women and men, everybody equally, should learn more about the history of feminism. The thing is that this, at least in my education, hasn't been part of the general curriculum, and I really think that it should be. So this is me trying to broaden the knowledge of what feminism in history was like and what we can learn from it. And in order to make it a little bit more interesting, I paired it with the second topic of this article, which is vocal techniques and the use of voice, the female voice specifically. I've been studying speech and language therapy, and a big chunk of that was to learn how to use your voice and how to advise patients. So I had a lot of training in how female and male voices are working and the anatomy behind them. Though I'm not a professional singer, and I'm definitely not one to be able to advise anyone on how to sing things in an artistic way, it's something that I really love because I care about music a lot, and it's one of my favorite topics to discuss. Here in this article, I'm trying to kind of explain how the female voice works on a very mechanical, anatomical level, so you can learn to use your own voice in a very hands-on type of way. And the goal is to explain to you how different women across history, or the more recent history, have used their voices and how this changed us and how this interestingly aligns, because there's an interesting alignment between the political movements in feminism and the goals of feminism and how women at that time were using their voices. Now, as for some quick news, I hope you can hear that I'm trying to improve the audio quality here. I invested in an interface, and I'm really hoping that it is quite obvious that the quality is better. I've been struggling with this interface for probably like 3 to 4 hours this weekend in a first attempt on Sunday night, and I was whispering, so it didn't really sound that great. And then on top of that, the whole episode lasted for about 1.5 hours. If I do the mental math, trying to cut an episode of 1.5 hours into just 45 minutes, I might as well try to just record a shorter version. And now that I know the exact things that I want to say, I think hopefully I can get my point across more quickly. But yeah, I'm just generally hoping you enjoy the better audio quality. And I'm still learning, obviously. This is only the beginning, but I'm very happy with how it's sounding so far. As for a short introduction to this article, a short piece of background, I published this article on the 18th of October 2024 in a publication called Music for Thought, which is one of my favorite publications on Medium. If you enjoy reading stuff about music, if you enjoy educating yourself on what's new in the music industry and also background information, I highly recommend checking out Music for Thought. They're great editors and they have a lot of information to share. So if you're into that, please check it out. Back then, I had just recently discovered this publication, or they had kind of discovered me and been so kind as to ask me whether I wanted to publish something with them, and I was so grateful. They kind of prompted me to sit down to do this article because initially the Sabrina Carpenter article that I read for the first episode of this podcast was a spin-off of this one. I initially put this article on the back burner and wanted to write about Sabrina and fifth wave feminism because that seemed to be more up to date. But also I find that this article needed to be written because this is the background story of why Sabrina and fifth wave feminism align. The reason for that is that throughout the history of feminism, female voices had always been singing in a voice that kind of represented the political agendas of the time. I was writing this article in September, October last year, and I finished it in Sun Moon Lake, which is this beautiful little green, bluish lake nestled into the mountains in the middle of Nantou province in Taiwan. It was one of those weekends where I decided that I would spend some time by myself and explore my new home, Taiwan. So I had done a lot of reflecting over the summer, and it seemed like the right time to write something a little more dense. I finished it on the rooftop of my hotel at the time, looking out on the lake, and the sun had gone down and it started raining, and I still kept on typing. So I'm saying all this to kind of encourage you. If you have an idea that's really good and you feel like it's almost there, don't give up on anything. I feel like sometimes we get so caught in an idea and we're like, we have to follow this through right now or we might forget about it. But if it's something really good, it will probably stay with you and it will probably revisit you sooner or later. So don't fret, no idea is ever lost. I don't think we have to capture everything in our lives. If it's a good idea, a good thing to do, then it will pretty much automatically find its way back to you, which is how I found this article again at Sun Moon Lake, and it was the perfect time to write it. Now let's get into the article. The Sound of Feminism, How Female Voices in Pop Culture Reflect Political Agendas. Listen your way through the empowerment of women in history and learn from great female voices like Sabrina Carpenter, Christina Aguilera, or Aretha Franklin how to use your own. Like most of you, I find myself running up and down Spotify playlists of Sabrina Carpenter, Billie Eilish, Chappell Rowan, Taylor Swift, and Miley Cyrus right now. And a realization that recently hit me is that most of my current favorites are exclusively sung by female voices. This reflection and some immersion into the theories behind feminist movements have led to discovery. There is a hidden link between how women use their voices in politics and in music. Since I'm a speech and language therapist, I've received ample training in how to cure and train voices, so this discovery was terrifyingly interesting for me. For any music enthusiasts and shower singers, I believe this might open your eyes to a whole new world. Pun intended. In the following article, I will propose my hypothesis of how female voices in pop culture and the current feminist agendas in politics are linked. However, I want to point out that this is my theory, and though there is evidence for it, you will probably find that you favor different artists that do not fit the scheme, and that is okay. Please let me know about any other singers in the comments so I can improve this article continuously. That also goes for the podcast, by the way. Since this might be a more dense piece of writing, here's the structure of this article for your reference. First, I'm going to be talking about female voices and the anatomical explanation behind them. Second, I'm going to talk about the history of feminism and vocal evolutions. And third, I'm going to be making a prognosis of the development of feminism and the music industry in the fifth wave. Let's get started with female voices, the anatomical explanation. Since I believe most people will skip this part, I will make it short and sweet and interactive. Yes, that is how much I love Sabrina Carpenter's album. There are two main things to understand when you're talking about voices. The first is registers, and the second is techniques. Let's begin with registers. Since men sound deeper than women, people sometimes assume that only certain men are able to sing high notes. This is, however, not true because anatomically, they can. Our society's conventions have simply led to most men abandoning their upper register of their voice. I have another article talking about genderless voice, which I might read next, in which I discuss specifically how right now LGBTQ plus members are stretching these stereotypes of what a male voice is supposed to sound like, and I absolutely admire them for it. So what I mean when I talk about registers is the following. If you sing from the lowest note that you can hit to the highest one, somewhere around the middle you will notice a change in your voice. We call this the vocal register transition. Take everyone's favorite, Please, Please, Please as an example by Sabrina Carpenter. If you sing along or listen to the verse, you will notice the notes are deeper and likely very comfortable to sing. As you hit the chorus though, there's a jump to a much higher pitch, which means your voice also changes. It jumps from the lower chest register to the higher head register. These names originate from where you feel your voice, quote unquote, when you sing. If you're a hobby singer, people will hear the difference between your chest and your head voice clearly, and you're likely to have issues blending them together. The skill of good singers like Sabrina, or one person who always impresses me with her vocal abilities is Chapel Rowan and also Billie Eilish, is to mix these registers so well that you can barely notice it. To experience it firsthand, try singing Please, Please, Please Yourself. And at this point, I will quickly mention that attached to this podcast is going to be a playlist on YouTube that I will be making. Throughout this article, there will be a lot of songs that I recommend you to try out or to listen. That way, I'm hoping to really turn this into somewhat of a workshop type of article. Also in the history part, there's going to be some older songs which I hope you can either fall in love with or at least learn from. So I encourage you to click the link and open the YouTube playlist either as you're listening to this if you have the time, or maybe you can have it playing at work so you kind of have a lot of really, really incredible female voices in the background of your day. If you so please, you can also sing along and feel for yourself how your voice feels different as you travel from the first wave of feminism to the fifth wave of feminism, from really old to new songs, through different vocal techniques and different registers as well. So highly encourage you to hit that link if you have the time. And the second thing you should know about singers is vocal techniques. They're a rather recent development in pop vocals and are used to add some spice to your singing. I say recent here because I'm talking about the alignment of the waves of feminism with music. Obviously, vocal techniques have been around for much longer, specifically in classical singing, but as you will find out, there's a difference between what is being used in classical singing and what is being used in pop singing or even jazz or musical songs. They have fancy names like belting, vocal fry, roaring, breathy singing, or trills/tremors. I'll start explaining the breathy voice because this is something very similar sounding to the head voice. This technique is one of Sabrina's trademarks, which makes her sound so feminine and cheeky. What she does is simply allow more air than normal to flow through her vocal folds. This is often perceived as a sexy or flirtatious voice in women, which has the added benefit of allowing you to blend your registers more smoothly and hit those airy high notes as well. It helps to use this technique for pieces with a larger vocal range, a lot of emotions, or generally many lo-fi songs. If you want to anatomically envision your vocal folds, they're kind of like if you put your hands together in a prayer position and then you move your wrists apart from each other while your fingers, your thumbs are still touching each other. This sort of triangle that you get is your vocal folds. Now, if you move your wrists back and forth, you can see a sort of vibrating motion, which is precisely how notes are being formed as you sing. And basically what happens when you sing is that air passes through these two hands, like in between your hands. It will make those vocal folds vibrate. Now, if you put them far from one another, if you put your wrists very far from one another, the triangle naturally becomes bigger. This means that more air passes through. This is precisely what I was talking about just now. This is breathy voice techniques. You move your vocal folds away from each other deliberately, and that allows you to sound a little more like this, like a little more flirtatious. If you move them more together, you can create more frilly sounds. Sounds that sometimes are not as favored in a female voice. And sometimes, if you're very harsh on your vocal folds, you can even hurt them, but we're going to get to that later. Similarly flirtatious, but more of an intricate technique is the trill or tremor. This technique was carried over into pop singing from classical music. When thinking of an opera singer, you will recognize that they sometimes, when holding the same note for a long time, make that note dance up and down quickly. The same goes for musical singers, by the way. They also often hold notes very long at the end, and then after a few seconds, they will start kind of jiggling that last note. This is called a trill or tremor, depending on how quickly and how far the up and down movement is. It is definitely something you have to train for a while before you carry it out comfortably, but once you can, you will sound very professional. An easy way to imagine the trill is to play two keys on a piano next to each other and then just hit them very quickly back and forth. Voila, you get a trill. As for belting, another technique, there are two queens that need to be mentioned, Adele and Christina Aguilera. If you listen to their songs, you will notice they have a very strong voice, which stays very thick and loud even in high notes. Sometimes it might sound a little bit like they were shouting. This is because instead of blending into their head voice for higher notes, they put extra muscular tension into their vocal folds and push their chest voice further up. This can easily be very harmful to your voice, but if done right, it gives your voice a very strong and confident feel. Now, if you think about Christina Aguilera or Adele, specifically Christina Aguilera in burlesque, these are singers that we often view as very dramatic but also very good singers. Sometimes this technique is being criticized because it doesn't actually show that much fine-tuning of the voice. And it can be super, super harmful because you're basically forcing your vocal folds to stay together more closely when they should be moving away from each other in order to prevent further harm. So I wouldn't actually recommend doing this a lot. One person who recently talked about this is actually Miley Cyrus, who was interviewed on Apple Podcasts. And she was talking about how she doesn't want to do touring at the moment because she's very aware of her vocal health. And in her new album, which is called Something Beautiful, she has a lot of what she calls big songs. Big songs means that these songs use a lot of higher notes that she's belting. Basically, she puts a lot of strain on her voice by singing these big songs. And that strain can easily be harmful. So if she were to tour through a lot of different countries and sing a concert each night, just like Sabrina did on her Short and Sweet tour, or just like Taylor did, she's kind of concerned she would hurt her own voice. And that is something that is very true for once, and also shows that she's very aware of what she's doing vocally. She has chosen, and is also anatomically prevailed, to sing very strong songs with a lot of belting. Interesting side note, she has a polyp on one of her vocal folds. This is also something she talks about in that podcast. That is very specific to her. That gives her character, that gives her this specific sound that Miley Cyrus is known for. But it comes with a disadvantage that her voice is basically hurting itself all the time. One side of her the one vocal fold is always hitting the other with force. And then adding the fact that she sings very big songs with little airy voice and lots of power and movement, her vocal folds are just a little bit more prone to injury. And so it's a very clever decision of her to decide not to sing those huge concerts, big halls filled with thousands of people. It is a very good decision of hers in terms of health to kind of prioritize being vocally healthy and only singing in smaller venues and only singing concerts that are further apart. Of course, that is something that most of her fans will not recognize. If you don't know about vocal technique, you might not understand where she's coming from with this, but I hope that by explaining it to you, you can see that how a singer sounds is really a trademark. It's really a deliberate choice, and that choice comes with ups and downs. For Sabrina, for instance, she complains about singing espresso a lot because using this breathy voice takes a lot of your airway, which might easily make you lightheaded. I, for instance, don't like singing espresso. I prefer singing please, 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 because it comes with verses that are kind of easier to sing, whereas espresso stays in this breathy voice the whole time. So it happens quite easily that after singing the song, you're feeling kind of dizzy. So I wouldn't say that it's necessarily much easier for Sabrina to sing her concerts, but she doesn't have to worry about vocal health quite as much. One of her beltiest songs, one of Sabrina's beltiest songs on Short and Sweet is Juno. If you try to sing Juno, you will notice that she's pressing up a lot more than in her other songs. So you can see how there's kind of a difference in what choices singers are making, what techniques they're using, and then this affects their whole marketing. This is why Sabrina is marketed as this feminine person who's very cheeky and very flirtatious and basically all the time horny. That's her marketing. But for Miley Cyrus, she's an artist singer. She tries to be taken very seriously. She really tries to deliver strong messages. She's not a cheeky person. She's a very true nature. She's trying to be really a force of nature. And she shows that in her voice. She sounds like that too. But those choices are not made just on a whim, just coincidentally. That happens very deliberately. And if singers don't lean into these special abilities, they will likely not become famous. And one person that also really shines again, I'm going to mention her again, is Chappell Rowan. Her ability, her control of her voice is just insane. I'm going to get into her later, but her whole album, The Midwest Princess, really uses a lot of vocal techniques. She's really one who's not just playing, and I think that also is reflected in her LGBTQ plus personality. She's not just doing the breathy voice that Sabrina is doing in stuff like Kaleidoscope. She sings in a very airy and breathy voice. But for Pink Pony Club, she's absolutely belting. I find it so beautiful how each of these women have their own personalities. Miley Cyrus, her strong one, and Sabrina, her very feminine one, cheeky one. And then Chapel Rowan just does them both, but that makes a lot of sense. She's not necessarily a better singer because she can do both. Because I'm pretty sure Miley Cyrus can also sing in an airy voice if she wants to, and Sabrina can just as well belt. For Chapel to be using more vocal techniques, because she's part of the LGBTQ plus community and is trying to promote diversity, makes perfect sense. That is a deliberate choice. So yeah, since I'm getting sidetracked here, you can tell how extremely into this vocal technique thing I am. I really, really love analyzing singers, not from a marketing perspective, but from a voice perspective and what deliberate choices in singing that they are making. Let's move on to the next technique. The vocal fry and roaring are similarly empowering techniques. The best way to explain these, I think, is to think of Amy Winehouse for vocal fry and Christina Aguilera's Tough Lover from Burlesque, which is also studied in belting and vocal breaks. Vocal frills are sometimes related to smokers, but you can achieve the same sound without any cigarettes. Both vocal fry and roaring are more of a sound rather than singing, because technically they don't produce a note, rather a sound. It is more of a very rough sounding accent. If you want to understand what it sounds like, listen to Tough Lover, where Christina Aguilera begins the song with a roar, which turns into some belting. She also adds some vocal frills, vocal breaks, and falsetto. So for a voice student or singing enthusiast, this song is a Bible. Try singing it and you will notice it is fucking hard to do it exactly the way that Christina does. You have to have a lot of control over your voice to pull through. At this point, I recommend listening to Tough Lover, which is a song by Christina Aguilera, and she sings it in her movie Burlesque, which she's playing with Cher. So this movie generally has a lot of really good songs that are vocally really challenging because Christina Aguilera is known for having a very wide vocal range. And one of the reasons that she's also considered a good singer is because she uses a lot of belting and a lot of roaring, and that sounds very impressive. She has 2 songs in the movie that I find really good. Tough Lover is the best for vocal frills because there's a lot of those, and because she starts it off in such a beautiful roar. It's very hard to find roaring in singers at the moment, but she really had a lot of roaring going on. She starts it with a big, big roar in Tough Lover, and then you can kind of juxtaposition that with a guy who takes his time, where she adds a little more breathiness to her voice because she's trying to be a little more flirtatious, a little more cheeky. Try to listen to these 2 songs very, very closely and try to imitate them. I'm not guaranteeing that you'll be successful because this is really, really hard. One thing that is making them specifically hard is that to roar or to have a vocal frill that sounds convincing means that you have to have a lot of trust in your own voice. And if you're beginning or if you're learning about your voice, likely that's what you're lacking. So that's what makes Tough Lover especially challenging, because you kind of have to come in with a lot of expertise in your own voice and a lot of trust that what you're doing is not sounding shit. The waves of feminism and their vocal evolutions. Now, after this little interactive workshop to discover your own voice, let's proceed to how this ties into feminism. My theory is based on the 4 waves of feminism and their political agendas. If you don't know them, don't fret, I'll give you an introduction. However, I highly recommend you read up on it. Honestly, I don't understand why this is still not part of our history curriculum in school. First wave, 1848 to 1920. In the spark of feminism, the suffragette movement and many events surrounding female inequality led to a cry for more rights for women. Initially, feminists at this time were mainly concerned with legal equality and the right to vote. At this point, female pop singing was still very much classical singing, meaning that trills and tremors were the norm. Women often sang in their head voice the whole time to sound more feminine, and even used breathy voice to add femininity to their chest voice. At this point, I encourage you to listen to Rêves, I hope I'm pronouncing this right because I absolutely cannot speak French, by Josephine Baker. Josephine Baker is a very famous singer and dancer of the time. She was famously nicknamed the girl with the banana skirt because one of her most famous performances was done wearing a banana skirt. An example of this is Rêve by Josephine Baker, who was a famous singer and especially dancer at the time. The notes she sings are very high, often held for a long time, and they end in a trill. Even the hymn of the suffragette movement, which you could consider the first hymn of feminism, adheres to these rules. This piece, called The The March of the Women, was composed by Ethel Smith after meeting the influential suffragette Emmeline Pankhurst. Its premiere was in Pall Mall, London, where a choir of suffragettes sung the song in honor of the Women's Social and Political Union. At this point, you can listen to The March of the Women. These examples clearly portray that while the empowerment of women was starting to surge both in politics and in music, it was merely an initial step. Writing The March of Women was definitely a revolutionary move, yet women were still viewed as a separate category from men in their political standing and the use of their voice in music production. The second wave, from the 1960s to the 1980s. This wave furthered the idea of inequality between genders, extending it beyond legal matters. Women during this time demanded equality in education, sexuality, work, and family. A huge part of this wave of feminism was the discussion around the legalization of contraceptives. Enabling women to take a pill to prevent pregnancy allowed for more agency over their bodies, planning a family, and also their career choices. In music, some influential voices include Dolly Parton, Olivia Newton-John, Aretha Franklin, Ella Fitzgerald, and Cher. If we take a look at this list, there is a large variety of voices and styles, which at this point largely correlates with these women's backgrounds. As for Dolly Parton and Olivia Newton-John, they were both white women raised in country music tradition. Newton-John stayed very true to the female head voice and breathy singing for the most part, but songs like Jolene or 9 to 5 by Dolly Parton marked the beginning of more chest voice usage. Furthermore, especially 9 to 5 does not just literally criticize the work ethics of the time, but she even uses some belting. Especially women of color started to become very aware of the advantages of such techniques. Though there is a sudden burst in female pop music with Bang Bang by Cher, who's a very interesting character of the time, by the way. She's one of the longest standing singers, and her vocal technique is purely amazing. She really is an impressively talented singer with a really unique voice. In the wake of female jazz singing, one song stands out as especially feminist and also especially vocally interesting and challenging. RESPECT, or Respect, by Aretha Franklin. Notably, the lyrics in female songs have become more pointy and more critical, which is especially true for the voices of women of color. At this point, I encourage you to listen to RESPECT, or Respect. This song, if you don't know it and you're a woman, girl, you better listen. You better wrap your head around this, because this is amazing. Aretha Franklin begins her song Respect in a mild belt. She breaks off her voice in favor of rhythmic singing and more spiky messaging. This type of fearless techniques clearly marks a step in feminist ideas in pop culture. What makes this song so special is the obvious cry for respect towards women. That in itself is noteworthy, but the fact that this song became immensely famous showcases that the feminist movement broadened and strong women became more mainstream. The third wave, from the 1990s to the early 2000s. This era of feminism started to recognize a new theme which would stay central to female movements: diversity. Yes, women were seen as one force before, but especially during the first wave, female empowerment was very white-centric. The third wave of feminism started to recognize that the female identity is multifaceted, and not all women are the same. The headlines diversity and female identity led to a mixing of movements in favor of female advocates of racial equality. This diversified the agenda of feminists, but also increased the interaction with other social movements. The 90s and early 2000s also saw some great new singers rise. While some, like Whitney Houston and Madonna, struggled their way through male-dominated ranks in the late 80s initially, some new faces like Christina Aguilera, Britney Spears, Shakira, and even Avril Lavigne joined the ranks later in the 2000s. And with all of these great voices came an opportunity for women to also cross racial and genre barriers in vocal techniques. Singers started to use not just empowering techniques like belting and vocal breaks, but also trills, screams, and roars joined the stage. Here, I encourage you to listen to Oops, I Did It Again by Britney Spears. Another win was the use of breathy voice in a flirtatious way without sounding submissive. Notice how there's a difference here. Before, in the second wave, we had people like Newton-John sounding submissive, sounding very feminine through breathy voice. But here, the breathy voice is used as kind of a joke, a irony, a play on the men that they are addressing. One example of this is Oops, I Did It Again by Britney Spears. She uses some light, Barbie-like frills in lower notes, but also makes use of her breathy voice to sound cute. Yet she, quote-unquote, plays with his heart and is, quote-unquote, not that innocent, which points to an obvious power dynamic. So she's kind of poking fun at the guys she's addressing. One example of a similar push and pull is Shakira's Hips Don't Lie. She has a very distinct vocal sound, which can be achieved by lifting the back part of the roof of your mouth. To illustrate this, what you should be doing is if you have the feeling of yawning, like try to yawn, you will feel if you're watching or feeling into yourself very closely, and this can be a little hard, so no worries if you don't get it right the first time. But you can notice as you're yawning that the back part of your mouth, the velum, the soft part of the velum, starts lifting up, which causes a sound that is almost opera-like. It sounds a little like you were singing with an apple in your mouth, but not in a bad way. This shows her improved awareness and need to pursue different types of voices. At this point, you can listen to Hips Don't Lie by Shakira. This song is therefore not only a good example of advanced vocal use and male and female interactions on a new level, but it also introduces more racial variety into pop culture. Shakira is considered the queen of Latin pop, which is a clear statement in light of the previous white and black singer dynamic. Now for the fourth wave, from 2012 to 2023, ? The fourth wave of feminism recognized another extent of diversity, which is that of LGBTQ+ communities. Digital media led to a further spreading of the idea of feminism with vast speed, and feminist advocacy online was highly prevalent. This is especially true for the #MeToo movement, which marks the beginning of this wave and dominates much of the following dialogue. There is a pointed discussion about including men in feminism, as raised by the He for She campaign by Emma Watson in a collaboration with the UN. She also held a very famous speech in the UN at that time. If you haven't listened to Emma Watson's UN speech for He for She, highly recommend. It's a really good speech. Famous voices from this time are Miley Cyrus, Taylor Swift, Rihanna, Blackpink, and many, many more. By this point, the market is so large and diverse, it is hard to get a good overview. The music industry seems to finally recognize the fact that at least 50% of their customers might want to hear female voices. At this point, I would recommend you to listen to Wrecking Ball by Miley Cyrus. And while this is true, recognition of this fact was lagging behind. More freedom was given to female productions, like in Wrecking Ball, which is only one example of women doing whatever the fuck they want in music. But still, most award ceremonies were far from equal. And even for Wrecking Ball, Miley Cyrus also talked about this in her recent interview. She received so much backlash for what she did when she was filming the videos for Bangers. There was a literal petition featuring many, many mothers who were concerned that this type of video, this type of music wasn't supposed to be broadcast. They were actually collecting signatures so radio stations wouldn't play these abhorrent songs. You can like or dislike it, of course, but it's art. And whether you like it or not, censoring it is, for me, very critical. Any sort of censorship, I find, is supposed to be done very, very critically. And viewing her Bangers album now, it was a move in political agendas. It was like testing the waters. It definitely was overstepping to a certain extent. But people, and specifically artists, overstep a little bit in order to move the dialogue forward. And I think that's what she did. People always test the boundaries of what's possible. And by testing them, you can find that you can go a little bit further, because she had to defend herself against a lot of mothers who were so concerned that their daughters might do crazy things like sing about their ex-boyfriends or do insane things like partying. It wasn't that her messages were that crazy. It was just that she was wrapping them in a new packaging, and people were actually freaking out over a song that was literally about her ex-boyfriend, which is something out of Taylor Swift's playbook. Miley Cyrus recently said that had she produced this video now, probably people wouldn't even care that much, because right now we have Sabrina Carpenter performing at the Brits Awards. She performed in lingerie with a couple girls, and the choreography was hard to be mistaken for something else. It was very clearly visible what she was pointing at. And we were hailing for it. We were loving it. I still love this performance. I absolutely enjoy Bedcam. I love the song so much. And now with this choreography from the Brits Awards, I've probably watched that video like 3 to 5 times. I really, really enjoy it. And I mean, what's there to hate? Why should we be so dismissive of it? Women have been naked in movies for literal decades, but we've been having this debate for a long, long time. And it seems oddly, and I'm not trying to criticize men here, but it just is odd that whenever female nudity is seen as pleasurable for men or is seen as just an addition to the movie, as something that's part of the art process, undressing is part of an art process, no matter if it's on catwalk or in a movie or in a rapper's music video with half-naked girls dancing in the back. It doesn't matter. Whenever it's kind of this packaging, female nudity is okay. But if a girl decides herself to get on a wrecking ball naked, or if a woman decides to dance in lingerie with only women present on stage, people are starting to judge. And it's so funny because where is the line? And that just makes me a little iffy. I don't want to say that that's a purely male choice because I recognize that most men don't think like that anymore. It's just ironic to me. Very, very ironic. Let's quickly talk about Wrecking Ball and its significance to feminism. This song was released by Miley Cyrus in her album Bangers, which also features party songs like We Can't Stop. Though it crushed the charts and was omnipresent on radio stations worldwide, Miley Cyrus never won a Grammy for this song. Since then, the world has moved on, and Miley Cyrus just received her first Grammy for Flowers. And by just, I mean in 2024. Also, Taylor Swift held a raging speech about female recognition in the music industry at the Billboard Awards. Another speech that I would highly recommend you to watch. The musical debate of fourth wave feminism was not centered around being allowed to sing however women pleased anymore. It was about also gaining the necessary recognition for doing so. Now, something that some of you might have not listened to, Pink Venom by Blackpink. Even if you don't like K-pop, this here is about feminism, so view it as a little lesson on feminist movements. Another notable change is the entry of more foreign music into pop culture, especially K-pop. This marks that though it has been a long time coming, third wave feminist ideas of inclusion are finally being realized. One favorite example of this would be Blackpink and their song Pink Venom, which marks their presence as an international band. Also, their fierce and rap-based approaches to female-made music is a juxtaposition to the stereotypes centered around Asian women specifically. No matter if you like K-pop or no matter if you like Blackpink even, they have also added to the history of feminism and the development of female voices. Fifth wave feminism? ? Some people argue that a fifth wave of feminism is on the rise now. In case you're wondering, yes, I am one of those people. As an avid feminist, I was enraged by YouTube spitting the word feminine energy at me at first. Yes, I love dresses, but can we please keep being strong females? Turns out the new idea is to have the best of both worlds, embracing your femininity and being fierce. I love it. And I think music is a testament to this. I've already mentioned Sabrina and her feminine way of singing, so I will not repeat myself. Actually, I have a whole article on Sabrina and fifth wave feminism because I find it that striking. And if you want to listen, it's episode 1 of this podcast. The song Coincidence is my favorite example of her cheekiness, sexiness, and sharp tongue in a perfect blend. So please go listen to Coincidence at this point. But in this article, I want to give another example. Chapel Rowan, I've already talked about her. There was a remark someone left under my Sabrina article reminding me that Chapel Rowan is also a good example of fifth wave feminist artists. And that is absolutely true. She obviously doesn't typically give a flying fuck about what people think of her and has her very own distinct style of music. She's truly an artist in how she reinvents vintage electro tunes and combines them both with soft high notes in a whispering voice and low rumbles. Here you can listen to Red Wine Supernova, and a lot of people listen to Good Luck Babe, which, gosh, to sing Good Luck Babe is so hard if you really want to get it across right. Fun fact, there is a cover of Sabrina Carpenter. She sings an acoustic cover of it. So the very, very highest part of the song, not the entire song, but the very highest part of it. Sabrina Carpenter took it down a few notches for her to be able to sing it more comfortably. So you can tell, like, if Sabrina does that for comfort, that's really hard to sing. The song Red Wine Supernova is one of my favorite examples of her creativity, as it uses some belting, some breathy voice, and some lower melodies, all in one. She displays that she has great control over her voice, and in doing so, she showcases the capability of women nowadays to use their voice effectively, be it in an art or in political inclusion. With artists that great and the social media repercussions exceeding my boldest dreams, I think we're approaching what the fourth wave artists screamed for, the recognition of the female voice, on the charts, award stages, and eventually in political discourse. If you look at the Grammys Awards this year, for instance, you will see that the performances were very, very feminine, very female-led. There was Sabrina Carpenter doing a medley of her songs in an almost jazz type of style with her perfect performances that she's always known for. There was Chappell Rowan singing Pink Pony Club on a huge pony. There was Billie Eilish, who did another performance. She's almost a staple at the Grammys at this point. There was Ray. If you don't know Ray, go listen to her, because this woman, Ray's album, The 21st Century Blues, is mesmerizing. She sung her song, Oscar-winning Tears. Then there was Cynthia Erivo singing a jazz cover as well. So the whole backbone of the Grammys this year seem to be female artists, and Benson Boone, of course, because that man also has some serious vocal abilities. But for men, I would need to write a completely separate article. I hope you had a nice and long coffee with this piece, preferably a venti Starbucks grapefruit Americano. Not just because it is big, but also just the right mix of sour and sweet. This was the time when I was so into grapefruit Americanos in Taiwan, so that's why I was specifically mentioning a venti Starbucks grapefruit Americano, which is a mouthful. I send a very mindful, demure, and cutesy hug from my mug to yours. And I hope you have a lot of fun using your voice in singing or otherwise after reading this. And with that, I finished reading the article. I think looking at how many remarks I've made in the process of this reading, you can tell that this is really a topic that is dear to my heart. The reason I didn't choose this as the first episode is because I knew I was going to get carried away. I think I've talked your ears off. At the same time, I'm just hoping that you are inspired to sing yourself, whether you do it right now or whether you will be coming home after work and just try out some of the things. Or even if you're just listening to some songs in a new way now, I'm really hoping I inspired you to learn about your own voice. It's one of those things in your life that if you're not alerted to it, if you're not singing as a hobby singer or professional, you really don't know as much about your voice. But it's something so powerful and it can move other people, obviously, whether you're talking or singing. It's such an important organ as well on a very basic level. It's one of those organs that only when you lose it do you realize how impactful it is in life. I'm so excited to share this. If there's any remarks, I'm so happy to address them in the comments. I'm so excited to answer any questions that might be coming up. And for any enthusiasts or hobby singers who are like, wait, some of this stuff has been too easy. Yes, I'm sorry, I had to break down a lot of things. I was trying to make it very simple so it's easy to digest and hopefully practical to some people who have not been addressing their voices thus far. Because with this article, again, I'm trying to address both the feminist movement and the music. So since it's kind of a stretch between the two topics, I want both types of listeners to be able to take something away from this. I wish you a nice day, and I hope to see you back here with a fresh cup of coffee for the next episode. Thanks for granting me access to your ears on the Mugcast. You can read more of my work on Medium at huginamug, or follow me on Instagram via the handle hugin.amug for cozy content and updates. Don't forget to follow the podcast and share it with a fellow coffee lover, and tell me which article I should read next in the comments. I hope you had a nice cappuccino with this article, and I send a warm hug from my mug to yours. Bye bye!